So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
So what are we drinking here, Michael?
Today we're drinking a Pilsner, Northwest Pilsner from Hellbent Brewing Company. I think we've had this one before. Still tastes pretty good to me.
Delicious. Today we're going to be recapping perhaps one of the best decades in movie history, the 2010s.
I like it. Starting off with some bold words.
Yeah, I feel comfortable. The democratization of filmmaking has given us more films than ever before in a decade, so yeah, I'll say it's one of the best decades ever. Hot take.
Starting out on a positive note.
Yes. Well, there won't be too many negatives.
That is kind of the point of the episode.
Yeah.
Sure you don't want to talk about, like, worst of the decade? Sounds less fun.
I really don't want to do that in any way.
Yeah, let's talk.
Okay. Do you want to start with our wounded soldiers, or do you want to give a little bit of a preamble about all the different criteria and thoughtfulness and how much we wrestled with these choices and really went over it for thoroughness?
Oh, I was still forming some of my picks within the last 15 minutes, so that gives you some sense of my scrambling. Yeah, some of these picks have been pretty cemented in their place for a while. Others were in flux until very recently. But I feel pretty good, I think, about most of the picks. What about you?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident. Almost everything was here in 2019, besides my number 10, which I almost just gave away, but I will not, which is a release from the year 2019 in America. Everything else was probably the same that it's been since 2017, 2018. Not too much has changed on my list since I started forming it about a year and a half ago.
Any, like, broad criteria that you use to put stuff on the top 10 features list, or is it just kind of the gut feeling? These are your favorites.
These are my favorite bangers. That's what I went with. I thought, how would Trey Edward Schultz build his list? That's how I'm going to do it.
It's a playlist.
Yep.
Greatest hits.
Mm-hmm.
Only note I really have on that note is that I do have one from each year. Made it very easy on myself that way. It became very, very difficult when I started pitting years against each other, and that I did find myself maybe succumbing to recency bias to some extent, so that helped me revisit some older titles.
So you limited yourself to one from each year.
Yeah, otherwise, I might have been too tempted to revisit some ones that I really loved in the past couple of years because they're so fresh. So I did, just want some representation from across the decade.
Did you look back at your previous lists, your end of the year top 10 lists, and end up picking the number 1 or number 2 from each of those years?
Actually, no. There are a couple years where that didn't happen. It's also a little funny for me to build the decade list when I feel like my own cinephilia didn't really kick into high gear until like 2016. Like, that was kind of a pivotal year for me, even though I've loved and watched movies my whole life. There was a turning point during this decade where, you know, it just kind of came to that next level for me, where I was like, this is like my thing. I love this stuff. It just, you know, forced me to look at those first, like, 5 years in a little more depth, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit more detail of who was I when I watched these and who am I now when I watch this. And, oh, wow, this is one of the greatest period pieces I've ever seen, or this is one of the greatest, Tom Cruise shooting aliens on a foreign planet movies I've ever seen.
Is that on your list? Come on.
No Tom Cruise on my list, but I stretched. I looked for a way to do it. Couldn't find one.
thought maybe Mission Impossible, if we had a technical achievement category like we do at the half-year point and end-of-year reviews.
I'd probably sooner go with Oblivion or Edge of Tomorrow, but yeah. Oblivion for OST.
Maybe the next Mission Impossible for the next decade.
Oh, I hope so. Anyways, let's move on to our Wounded Soldier.
Would you like to begin?
Nah, let's have you do it.
Okay. Very first category, and I am breaking a rule already. We're off to a great start. Historically, our wounded soldiers have been defined as ones that were like critical, not bombs, but below 60 or so on Metacritic, or they did poorly at the box office.
Mm-hmm.
For the context of this conversation, I started thinking about ones that I just couldn't find on any best of the decade lists. The one I picked ended up actually having a pretty good Metacritic rating. And even last night when I was doing a little more research, I ended up finding it on one best of the decade list. So I completely screwed myself here. But my Wounded Soldier is Noah Baumbach's Mistress America, starring Lola Kirk and Greta Gerwig, with whom Baumbach co-wrote the script. Kirk plays a college freshman in New York City who is kind of stumbling through her first few weeks of school when she meets her soon-to-be stepsister, played by Gerwig. Her name is Brooke, and she is instantly kind of fascinated by Brooke. She's this hip, exuberant 30-something-year-old who Kirk's character is not only, instantly friends with, but also sees as maybe inspiration for a story because Kirk's character wants to be a writer. And I don't know that this is towards the top of many people's lists of Baumbach's work. It could be. Maybe that's not a fair statement, but for me, it's screwball comedy. That's the flavor of it, and that's what I love. It's the lightness and its personality that feels like old-fashioned screwball comedy, modernized in a really fun way. I love these performances. I think Kirk is incredibly endearing. The exuberance that Gerwig has is so fun. And while it's light, I think like a lot of screwball comedies, it has that kind of thinly veiled layer of darkness just beneath the frivolity. It's accessible, it's funny, it's light, and easily rewatchable for me. Mistress America.
Hi, this is Tracy Fishko. I go to college in the city, and my mom said I should call you. My mom is marrying your dad.
Do you want to hang out? Do you know where Times Square is?
Tracy!
Times Square is so crazy.
Isn't it?
I don't know anyone who lives here.
Yours truly. I got off the bus from Jersey. I thought this was the cool place to live. It's Times Square.
It's so stylish.
I know. I freelance as an interior decorator. You know the Bowery Hotel?
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, if you walk about a block south, there's a laser hair removal center that's very hip. I did the waiting room.
I think I might take a little bit of an issue with the description of joviality you give it. Maybe I'm misremembering, but about 2/3 in, doesn't it get fairly dark when something comes to light between some characters and they go to like a house somewhere and find something out? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, this, as the first few lines of this movie indicate, it is in part a story of betrayal.
Yeah, okay, so there is a little bit more darkness.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Brooke's character, she is a woman with many passions and interests, all of which are very funny and endearing, but her main goal is to start a restaurant.
It was the fashion thing, right?
That too. She had a
and
friend
then her
who
friend,
betrayed her.
And that's the house that they go to, and exactly. I really liked this movie. This is one of my favorite Baumbach movies.
Yeah, but the tone is very light. This is breezy. Really?
I remember it being kind of, for me, kind of a gloomy dark sometimes. Also,
me,
very
it's
light.
Immediately accessible. I wouldn't describe it as a dark film. I think for me, it's first and foremost very digestible.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, I think that's what makes it great is that it has that screwball flavor, while it is also about when reality collides with your dreams. Brooke has this dream of opening a restaurant that has all these kinds of crazy things, or that she envisions it will have, like a back room where people can do yoga, a little cafe where kids can do their homework, and it always seems a little far-fetched when she describes it. And this came out in 2015. It's no spoiler because people probably have seen it by now. That dream does not come true, and I think it is partly about, how crushing it is to have your dreams not come true when reality comes crashing in. So yeah, I think you're right. There is, meaning beneath some of the comedy, because I think it is a very funny movie first and foremost.
I think I also remember having the awkwardness effect of it, where there's some scenes that are just so awkward that you don't want to watch.
Oh yeah,
which Baumbach is kind of the king of. So to me, that is dark, because that's how I interpret it. So maybe it's not dark, but I definitely remember not wanting to look at the screen about 2/3 of the way into that film. I really liked it, though. It's a good choice. My Wounded Soldier is from a very little-known director by the name of Terrence Malick. This film is called Night of Cups. It, in fact, does follow all of the rules for a Wounded Soldier. It stars Christian Bale. It has a preposterous amount of talent, both behind the screen and in front of the screen. I don't think this is one of the projects Trey worked on, but it could be one of the ones. He also worked on Song to Song and Voyage of Time and a few others. But it's a vignette story of a man who's at odds with his identity, and different women bring different sounds and recollections and voiceover styles to his identity and to us, the audience, who are inhabiting the identity by hearing it. I really love it. A lot of people are very passionate about either hating it or loving it. I would encourage anyone who likes Malick to at least give it a shot, because I think that what he and Bale do with the voiceover and all these additional actresses that he falls in love with and has these experiences with is it's a very emotional experience that I enjoyed.
All of those years, living the life of someone I didn't even know.
Let me tell you about you. I want to make you rich.
You see the palm trees? They tell you anything's possible.
No one cares about reality anymore.
It's different these days. What's going on with you?
I can't remember the man I wanted to be.
Just don't threaten me with leaving, okay? Just do what you want to do.
You don't want love. You want a love experience.
They are like flavors. Sometimes you want raspberry, then after a while you want some strawberry.
You have love in you. I know it.
Blind. Suppose it isn't there for me.
I saw Night of Cups back when it came out. It was definitely not in the camp that hated it. It was maybe somewhere in the middle where I didn't respond to it in a big way. But it is one that does seem to kind of call me back. I do kind of have an itch to revisit it. I think I'd probably rather revisit it over Song to Song, which is, in a similar style for sure for Malick. But yes, it is a much better pick than mine in many ways for the Wounded Soldier category, because this was considerably more divisive.
Yes, at least points-wise. Anyways, on to number 10. What is your number 10 film of the decade, Michael?
My number 10 is The Souvenir.
You're very special, Jerry.
No, I don't think I am.
Oh, no, you don't think you will.
Very normal, really.
You're not normal at all.
I feel as though I want to not not live my whole life in this very privileged part of the world I come from. I want to be really aware about what's going on around me. Sorry.
We can all be sincere, but what's it all for?
From 2019.
From 2019.
Directed by Joanna Hogg. Regular listeners of the show will have already heard me talk about this 3 times. I think I'm going to keep this somewhat brief because we talked about it when it first came out. We talked about it when it came out at the halfway point in 2019 and again at the end of the year. So
this was your number 1, correct?
It was, absolutely. And it's by the British filmmaker Joanna Hogg. It's a semi-autobiographical story about her experiences as a film student in 1980s Britain, while she was also in a toxic relationship with a heroin addict. I wholeheartedly love the performances. Honor Swinburne plays Hogg's stand-in. I also really like Tom Burke, who plays the boyfriend. I really, really love the style and the kind of static compositions and the kind of elliptical feel of it. And I think it's very sad, but it feels just so kind of honest and private and self-reflective. All the words I've already used to describe it on previous episodes, but I love all those same things. Those haven't really changed. I had the pleasure of watching it twice since your Christmas present to me was the Blu-ray of the Souvenir.
That's correct.
And loved it just as much on second viewing. There were things I didn't pick up on first viewing, such as I thought I had seen Julie, Hogg's stand-in, first meet this boyfriend at this party that the movie opens in, and you see her looking at this guy sitting on a couch, and she's looking at the back of his head, and I kind of had remembered that being the first time she noticed him, right? That was the first memory she had, presumably. And then I realized on the second viewing, it's actually not really the first interaction, because before that, we don't even see him, but she comes down to the front door and opens the door, and somebody else says, "Hey, Julie, this is Tom." And she says, "Oh, nice to meet you, Tom." I don't think his name's not Tom. That's the actor's name. His name is escaping me. But I had totally missed that the first time, because you wouldn't know until you've seen this character that he is the one who becomes her boyfriend. It's just those kinds of details that I think are really distinctive and kind of fun, and say something about the way in which different memories kind of stick out in your head. I think it's kind of a challenging watch, because it's a sad story, but I think it is a remarkably distinctive kind of visual memoir. That's The Souvenir. What is your number 10?
My number 10 is also from the year 2019. It is also my number 1 film from that year. It is Gaspar Noé's Climax.
Oh, you're so good. You liked it? I'm so happy. I couldn't be happier.
Truc qui monte.
Qu'est-ce que t'as? Tu sais garder un secret.
Nice.
This is a nightmare-filled, inducing trip on sangria at a dance party in a school in the middle of a snowy countryside that starts with the ending and ends with the beginning, and is, light your hair on fire, die from poisoning, children die from electrocution.
I'm scared.
Throughout, it's just it's a good time. That's what all these words I'm saying mean. A very good time. The lens and how Noé uses it in conjunction with the editing is some of the most exciting filmmaking I saw in the entire decade. And it's one of the best ensemble pieces by a group of performers I've ever seen as well. So it's Climax, currently streaming on Amazon Prime. If you're thinking, gosh, what does a living nightmare look like? Check it out.
Bring grandma, bring the kids. Fun for the whole family.
Maybe not grandma. I could see kids liking it, but
there is a child.
But not grandma. On to the Squanderies. What do you got, Michael?
You want to do squandered actor or actress first?
Let's go with whichever way you're leaning. I'm not too passionate.
All right. The actor who I thought was a bit squandered over the past decade was Luis Guzman. Back, I think around like the 2000s, when I was quickly doing my research for this category, I'd kind of forgotten that Luis Guzman had worked with like PTA, Soderbergh, De Palma. He worked with some great directors.
That's right. He worked with Soderbergh. Yeah. Great directors.
We mentioned the movie The Count of Monte Cristo also just before recording. I like that movie a lot. I don't recall who made that movie, but I like that movie, and he's great in that. I think Luis Guzman is a terrific character actor and
a comedic actor.
Yeah, he's hilarious. I was struggling to think of even a single movie he had been in over the past decade, and it looks like he has been busy when I looked up his IMDb profile. But someone who I just have missed seeing on screen this past decade because
the movies
our paths have not crossed. And I just think he needs to get back to work with maybe some auteurs who I think can really bring that potential to life.
Yeah.
Luis Guzman. Hopefully we'll see him in the 2020s.
I hope so. Let's get him in a Villeneuve movie, get him in a Nolan movie, get him in 2 PTA movies. Let's go for it. Let's go ham. My squandered actor, much like your choice, would do great to work with any auteurs besides Danny Boyle. And my choice for squandered actor is Ewan McGregor, who is a truly fantastic actor who had a great turn in the limited series season 3 Fargo, which unfortunately was his best performance of the decade, which was, I mean, for our show, in a television show, I love TV, we don't talk about it much here. He played 2 different characters, 2 brothers in that show. It's a fascinating and very, very good performance. But as far as film goes, he had an extremely mediocre decade compared to the decade beforehand. And I think that in the 2020s, maybe if he stops with the superhero movie right now, superhero movies, you know, he did that Suicide Squad one or whatever it is that's just about to come out right now.
Is that right? He's in that?
He's in the Harley Quinn one.
I did not know that.
So, not the most promising start to 2020 as a decade, or the 2020s, I should say. But I think that if he were to maybe do an Ang Lee film, which I know maybe isn't the hottest name for an auteur right now, I think that he, like Will Smith, has the ability to bend the rules of a camera to them as a performer, which is what Will Smith did for Gemini Man, and just something that Ang Lee happens to be able to do with the navigation of his lens. So I'd like to see him in that sort of a thing. He's not a very grounded actor. I don't care to see him do Trainspotting Part 3 again as this gritty performance. I want to see fun, magnanimous Ewan McGregor with his full repertoire of all the different slur that he can make his voice sound like. I want it, and I want it now. I want it for fun.
Do you like him as Obi-Wan Kenobi?
I love him as Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Me too.
Right?
I'm a fan.
He's the best. So that's my choice for squandered actor. I love him. That's why I chose him. On to squandered actress. Who you got, Michael?
My squandered actress is Rose Byrne, who has been in movies that I did like, but I liked mainly just because she was in them. I think perhaps her best movie of the decade was Bridesmaid, where I thought she was hilarious in Bridesmaid. I love Bridesmaid.
Well,
in general.
Neighbors.
I also greatly enjoyed Neighbors. I think
she just had a bigger lead there.
Yeah. I think she has such comic chops. She's always just so fun to watch. She's such a pleasure to see, and I would just, not to suggest that there isn't value in the kind of middle-brow fare that I think she has appeared in quite a bit over the past decade, but I think
she has a knack for.
That does seem to be where she has resided.
Mm-hmm.
And I like some of those movies. Instant Family, I also saw that recently. That is a perfectly charming movie, and she is a big part of that. I just think that she has chops that could really be put to use in better movies, to put it quite simply.
Movies more like Peter Rabbit.
I have not seen Peter Rabbit myself. I think there is a sequel coming out, so I don't know that there is a turning point anytime soon in her career.
You wait until your nephew?
Niece.
You wait until your niece is like 3 years older and you have to watch movies with her. You're going to be thanking God Peter Rabbit exists.
I know. I don't know that I have like directors in mind that I just see as like a natural fit, but I don't know, even Game Night I think is a better kind of comedy than the ones she's in. I could see her maybe in a Iannucci kind of comedy. I don't know, just some fare with a little more personality. That I think could really give her the spotlight she deserves, because I think she is hilarious and great.
But I think Jason Bateman might be an interesting director for her, because he has an extremely good comedic temperament, and he's also a very capable filmmaker. He made the TV show Ozarks as well, but he's made a few films.
Yeah, Jason Bateman.
That's my pitch.
Check her out.
All right.
Who is your squandered actress?
My squandered actress is none other than the Jodie Foster. She is a very capable, good film director. She directed an episode of Black Mirror. She directed Money Monster. She directed The Beaver. The Beaver had Mel Gibson and Jennifer Lawrence and, Anton Yelchin. Just an incredible cast. It's a movie that was quite maligned, but I have a very soft spot for it. Came out in 2011. Money Monster had George Clooney. It is actually, in my opinion, a very sharp film. And then her Black Mirror episode was very good, but her performances as an actress kind of run counter parallel to everything I just said. They were extremely disappointing. Most recently, we saw her in Hotel Artemis, which was terrible, to put it lightly. It also featured Dave Bautista, who is amazing, and one of his projects will pop up later today. It also had Sofia Boutella, which she just got mentioned, her project Climax. So Jodie Foster is, I think that if she acts in a big-time filmmaker's project, like a Villeneuve, she could easily have a return to force. I see her in the same lens as a Robin Wright, where if you give her responsibility and austerity with how the camera shoots her, then she will give it back tenfold. If you don't, and you shoot her poorly, you get what you saw in Hotel Artemis.
Yeah. When I think Jodie Foster, I think Silence of the Lambs and those close-ups that Demi uses. So good in that. I don't feel like I've seen a performance from her quite like that in a while. So fully support this choice.
Thank you. On to number 9 of the 2010s. What have you got, Michael?
My number 9 is House of Tolerance by the French writer-director Bertrand Bonello. I just as easily could have picked another movie of his called Nocturama, which Taylor was not a huge fan of, I understand.
I was not.
I partly went with this one because I saw this much more recently, only within the last couple months. I saw it partly because I had seen it on multiple best of the decade lists, and that's why we make the list, is to find stuff we didn't know. It had been on my radar ever since I liked Nocturama, but this had certainly put some urgency around checking it out, and I really liked it. It's about the women who work in a high-class brothel in Paris right around the start of the 20th century. It's essentially an ensemble piece. One of the most recognizable actresses is Adele Haenel, who people now would probably most associate with Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
I believe she won an award for best supporting actor or like premiere actress for that film.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I think she's had a very good decade. She actually crossed my mind. I loved her in this, Nocturama, BPM, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, The Unknown Girl. I think she's had a lot of really good movies this decade. But I just was completely absorbed with Benello's filmmaking here. He has kind of this observational approach where it's almost kind of slice of life, in that we're watching these women, as they live out their lives as prostitutes, and he has all these kind of different techniques that he's using, split screens and really anachronistic music. It's partly just about, their subjugation by wealthy men, and how kind of stuck in the position they are in. They are very much stuck in the position they're in. And I think it's a very kind of empathetic portrait of these women, while also not sparing us any of the, uncomfortable aspects of it. But I think it's just absolutely gorgeously rendered with these really dark colors, dark reds and blacks, this lavish production design, and this really fluid camera work that just really kind of immerses you in the house of the brothel. Just really, really effective filmmaking for me. That is House of Tolerance.
J'aime profondément les putains. Je les trouve merveilleuses.
Si nous ne brûlons pas, comment éclairer la nuit?
La maison, elle va fermer?
Je sais pas. Et ce soir, il va falloir montrer un peu de joie, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, madame. Musik, bitte.
This is a song about a bad girl. Something that happened to me a long time ago.
Did you have time to check this one out or no?
I started it and then was unable to finish it, not because I didn't love it, but because I just didn't get to it.
Priorities.
I made it about 20 minutes in, and then I had to go see Cats, I think, on New Year's Day, because that was the last day that there was going to be a sold-out theater to see Cats in, and if you're going to see Cats, you have to see it in a sold-out theater, because no one wants to be alone in a theater watching Cats.
That sounds way scarier than anything that happens
right
here.
So after that, I just didn't get to it because I didn't, and I feel bad about it. But now maybe because of you putting it on your list, I'll finish it. I still have where I'm left off at. I'll pick it up.
It awaits you.
I'll pick it up.
What is your number 9?
My number 9 is a film slightly less well-known than your number 9. It is Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. So this is a war movie based around the Dunkirk city during World War II for the evacuation from France to England, in which Tom Hardy made me cry like a little child. On multiple viewings, I cry harder and harder every time I watch his scene in which his plane engines give out because these ran out of gasoline, but he continues to glide on, strafing the fighters to protect the men in the boats as they flee back to England. This is my favorite war film of the decade. This is this is one of my favorite films ever.
Period.
I don't really know how to explain it. I was very unpassionate about it the first time I saw it, which was just in a normal theater, normal 2D screen. And then I saw it in IMAX the following day. And that made a huge difference. It's one of the first times that popped for me. Just getting to see the full letterboxed, and have those sounds and have the time to process it. Because the first time I saw it, I didn't really understand why I was juggling all these characters. I didn't really know what the rules were, what was happening. I just was unfamiliar with a lot of it. And then I saw it a week later at the Cinerama.
Ooh,
and
that's the place to see it.
That build up, allowing me to get inside of it and really understand it. Yeah, this is a war film that I would encourage anyone without PTSD to watch. If you do have PTSD from a real war, probably don't watch this. It's extremely realistic. It's been compared to Saving Private Ryan, and it's a bloody war film.
That's right. If I'm trying to remember now, was it PG-13?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember it is violent. Like, there are bombs and gunfire and everything, but I can't remember if there was gore. Like, this is, I think, the kind of war movie that, like, I don't know, people who normally can't take that kind of thing could still very much enjoy.
Yeah. The thing about this one is it's suffocating because they're in boats that are sinking. Mm-hmm. So all the men get trapped inside the boat and drown slowly. There's a lot of metaphors made, I think, about, like, being trapped inside of a tuna can, and all the sailors are a bunch of tuna, that type of thing. So it's not super gory. I think there's a few scenes with people getting shot visibly. Mainly it's just metal getting perforated, whether it's a boat or an airplane, though. But this is my favorite war film. That's my number 9. It's Nolan. It's good. Check it out if you haven't seen it.
I would be perfectly happy swapping that out with a lot of movies on my list. That'd be up there for sure.
Good. On to what star was born in the year, or not the year, what star was born in the decade of the 2010s? Who you got, Michael?
I'm tempted to change mine. We were discussing what constitutes a rising star for this category.
Oh, not a rising star. A star that's been born.
A star that has... See, that was the confusion, I think, over the name of the category. It was initially A Star is Born, meaning which stars were in fact born in this decade versus rising stars, ones that
which
I
is
thought
what
were...
you wrote. Yes.
Exactly right. Which directors do I think in the 2020s...
You've been doing this for a while now.
I know. In the 2020s, who do I think will come to prominence? So, yeah, there are directors like Ari Aster, who I don't think is your pick, right? To use him as an example.
No, I didn't pick a director.
Arguably, he has risen. That was kind of how I thought about certain directors like that, whereas I thought about who are the directors that we will say came to prominence in the 2020s, that they are, in that sense, currently rising. So my rising...
It is who was born. Which star was born?
So we have two different interpretations.
Based on Bradley Cooper's A Star is Born. That's how this category was developed, sir.
Two interpretations of the category we created. So my pick is Mati Diop, actually, for Atlantics. Critically acclaimed 2019 debut.
That's not how you leave that off. Criterion Collection official print.
That's right.
Mati Diop's Atlantics.
I was very excited to see that. Thought that was cool. Yeah, I don't know. I really liked Atlantics. We talked about that in depth on the podcast already. It is just one that has stuck with me in the sense that I keep thinking there is just a display of some instinctual filmmaking on display there. Like, it just feels to me like the person behind the camera there knows what she's doing. And even though this was a very widely acclaimed movie in 2019, it's her debut feature. And I am very eager to see in the next 10 years what she follows that up with. And I think that will be considered the decade in which she kind of rose to prominence. Mati Diop. Excited to see what she does next.
I am too. So my Star is Born was envisioned as a star who was born in and of the decade we are speaking, which is the 2010s. And my choice is Adam Driver, who began his career in the year 2010, according to IMDb credits, and up until 2019 had one of the best single-decade runs I think that any actor at any point in history has had. Now, whether or not all of his movies are, success, definitely not. But I think all of his performances are extremely consistent, with him giving his all to what he understands the performance to be. He brings a different energy almost to every single project. I think of the Noah Baumbach film, While We're Young. Is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. It's so different than who he is in Marriage Story, another Baumbach film, but that's equally as different as who he is in the Man Who Killed Don Quixote. He's just an incredibly refreshing performer who is throaty and wholehearted, and I can't imagine any other character playing opposite of John David Washington in BlacKkKlansman. Like, he is just such a multi-talented actor to me, and a real thespian in this age that has very few developing actors of his caliber. So The Star is Born in the 2010s, and the star is Adam Driver. On to number 8 in the 2010s. What is your number 8 film of the whole decade, Michael?
My number 8 is one we already talked about, and it's also my Wounded Soldier, and that's Mistress America. So I won't repeat too much. I can maybe just call out some of the particular details I like that I didn't already describe. One detail this movie is maybe most known for is its finale, which, as you alluded to, is in this country house in upstate New York, where Greta Gerwig and Lola Kirk's character go in hopes of finding financing for Gerwig's restaurant. She's hoping to get it off the ground. It's the house where her ex-boyfriend lives and her ex-best friend lives. According to Brooke, the ex-best friend betrayed her and stole her boyfriend. And
her business.
And her t-shirt business. Correct. And it's just, it's this hilarious, kind of screwball farce with people coming in and out of different rooms in this big mansion, spitting that pinball machine like dialogue from one person to the next. That's just part of the genre. That's all really funny. You have new characters kind of entering this scene and leaving. It's just kind of how it has that electricity of it that's very funny. At the same time, it's leading right up to the kind of heartbreak that the movie is partly all about. Just another reason to go see Mistress America from Noah Baumbach. That is my number 8. What is yours?
My number 8 is a capital film from the Coen brothers called Hail Caesar. It is a prestige picture from Capitol Pictures. It stars Josh Brolin as Eddie Mannix, a man who runs Capitol Pictures lot and is very penitent for the fact that he can't quite give up his cigarette habit for his wife. He's balancing a great many things, from his lead performer getting kidnapped by communists to some scandals that Tilda Swinton twins are trying to report on, to Lockheed Martin trying to hire him away from Capitol Pictures, and tour that were so simple to describe the many joys of this film, from Alden Ehrenreich yodeling and jumping back and forth in a lasso, or making his spaghetti into a lasso, and just circling up a dame's finger. This film is everything that anybody ever wanted a classic Golden Age era picture to be. In the here and the now, you get Scarlett Johansson as a smoky voiced, no bullshit, tired of all the attention Hollywood star. You get Jonah Hill as I don't even know how to describe Jonah. He is a notary public for the picture company who had served time for them and gone to jail because of something that the company had done. So he's the professional person who becomes the company person when they need him to be the company person. It's just a spectacular film. As soon as I turn it on, I start smiling. I have a great time.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
How long since your last confession, my son?
27 hours.
It's really too often. You're not that bad.
Here at Capitol Pictures, as you know, millions of people look to us for information and uplift and, yes, entertainment. And we're going to give it to them.
And action.
An army of technicians and actors and top-notch artistic people are working hard to bring to the screen our biggest release of the year. Hail Caesar is a prestige picture with one of the biggest stars in the world, Baird Whitlock.
A truth we could see if we had, but... if we had... Faith, cut!
It has Channing Tatum. What else do you need?
This is not one of my favorite Coen Brothers movies, as you know, as some listeners know, but there are things I like about it, for sure. Alden Ehrenreich, I do really like him in that movie, which I think we talked about him way back in the day when we talked about Hail Caesar. He's one that I kind of remember people talking about as on the verge of great stardom this decade, right? Because he had Hail Caesar. I think he maybe followed that up with the
Solo.
Yeah, there was the one with Warren Beatty in it as well, somewhere in the mix, but I don't remember what the order of those was. I feel like that stardom really hasn't come to be, which is a shame, because I did really enjoy him as the Western star.
Yeah,
Hail Caesar.
I think it's coming. I think it's still coming. I think that as he hits his 30s, it'll take him in stride.
I didn't realize he was that young.
I think he's that young. I think he's, around our age. I think that he's about to,
He's got time.
Because he's younger than Scarlett, for sure. And Scarlett's only like 5 years older than us.
Yeah.
So, all right. That is my number 8. Empirically correct, of course. On to the best ensemble of the year. What is the best ensemble of the decade, Michael? What's the best ensemble of the decade?
I had a tough time with this category, which I understand you did as well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, like I told you, name any movie from any auteur, and they probably have an amazing ensemble. So this is kind of a bullshit choice, if ever there was one.
Yeah, mine's kind of a gut reaction, one that came to mind, and I felt good about it, so I'm going with it, and that's Kelly Reichardt's Certain Women.
It's a great film. And each girl has a pretty equal amount of time. Very sturdy performances.
Yeah, it's from 2016. It's kind of a triptych about women in a small northwest town, I believe.
Montana.
Is it Montana? Yeah. Thank you. Starring Laura Dern, Michelle Williams, Kristen Stewart, and a newcomer, named Lily Gladstone, and I think these are all just terrific performances by these women, and I think it's super cool to see someone so established and professional like Laura Dern kick it off, and then it end with a newcomer in Lily Gladstone's part of the story. She's with Kirsten Stewart in a kind of romance, or a almost romance, in the third chapter of the movie.
Or like the first 10th of the third chapter of the movie.
Yeah.
Because Stewart's out of there pretty quick, right?
In that chapter, I think that's right. I remember being... I really liked the movie when I saw it. I wasn't wholeheartedly in love with it, and yet it has just kind of stuck with me in a way I didn't expect, and I think it's very much because of these women. So that's my ensemble pick. What is
I love that
yours?
Movie. My ensemble pick, which is empirically correct, of course, is the film Spotlight. I put a lot of thought into this, and I feel best about Spotlight because there's a fairly equal amount of time given to most the main characters. The only one that doesn't have as much time is Liev Schreiber, but what he does with his brief time, I think, is even more impressive than what everybody else does with their more time, which is like Mark Ruffalo, Rachel McAdams, Michael Keaton. That's my choice. It's pretty well defined as an ensemble piece. It's a takedown of the Catholic Church for what they've done to children. I'm pretty passionate about the film for that reason. I really like it, and there's not too much to hammer on about other than it's a fantastic picture, and it's called Spotlight, and it's got the best ensemble of the decade, Michael.
That one came to mind because Rachel McAdams kind of came to mind when I was thinking about Squandered, because of how great she is here. I was like, why has she not been in more this decade? I loved her here. I thought she was hilarious in Game Night. She doesn't put out a lot of work volume wise.
I would say it could be because there's limited roles for women, Michael.
That is certainly possible. Would like to see more from her.
Agreed. On to number 7 of the decade.
My number 7, coincidentally, is another Kelly Reichardt film. This one's from 2010, and that is Meek's Cutoff, starring Michelle Williams again. A great director-actress pairing throughout both of their careers. It is about starring many others. This is very much an ensemble piece. It's about a group of settlers traveling by covered wagon through Oregon in the middle of the 19th century.
Through the rolling hills of the West.
Nice. I like the tone there, too.
Yeah.
You should have... Can we get like a version of that movie with you narrating? That'd be nice. Yeah, this is one I did not see when it came out in 2010. I only saw it within the last couple of years, but was completely floored by it. I wish I had a chance to revisit it before the podcast, but it has stuck with me in a very real way. It's partly just about the difficulty of their journey and them losing their way. One of the men in this group of settlers claims to know a shortcut to their destination, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and that only leads them further off the path to where they want to go. But it's told with a very clear eye towards the perspective of the women in this group, and partially interested in sort of the arrogance and ineptitude of the men, but also just the fear of this group as they start losing water, as people are literally dying, and just that sense of panic kind of coming in as they are lost, essentially. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of has it all. It's just a really, really lived-in period piece. The framing, the rhythm of it, the performances, you just feel like you were kind of out there, stranded, lost with them. I love it.
We follow land downhill.
We need water. That much I know.
That's what you think, that we're lost?
I'd say that seems about the right word for it.
We're not lost, we're just finding our way.
I don't blame him for not knowing. I blame him for saying he did.
We made our decision. This is only a bad dream soon. It's going to be a story to tell.
Meek's Cutoff.
It's a great film. I really like that film. My number 7 is a very unknown film from a very small-time director once again. His name is Denis Villeneuve. It's a little film starring Ryan Gosling, Ana de Armas, Harrison Ford, Robin Wright, Jared Leto. It's called Blade Runner 2049. It's fucking beautiful to look at. I rewatched it in 4K before the episode. And my goodness, does Roger Deakins know how to shoot a beautiful picture when he's not making something dumb like 1917. My goodness. The end with the water coming down as the cars sinking into the water, like those shots are incredible. The gliding over the city and the Puget, what would that be, a hover car? Oh my gosh, it's just, this is one of the coolest, I guess, remake, reboot, sequels all put together that I've ever had the pleasure of witnessing. And it's one of the best sci-fi films of the decade in an extremely rich decade of sci-fi films. We won't talk about Ex Machina. That's a great sci-fi film that came out this decade. So this is beautiful. And Villeneuve and Deakins did equal parts work. I mean, you have Mackenzie Davis in a tiny little role who completely brings the streets to life in a way that they just don't come to life without her. We talk about, cyborgs and humans being able to procreate, which doesn't sound interesting until you see the artistic way that they kind of expose it. I mean, The Beauty of a Dead Tree. This is the film. You looked at me a little bit peculiarly when I said Dave Bautista.
That's right. It literally just clicked.
This is the Dave Bautista vehicle. Yeah, this is one of my favorite films of the decade, and I think it's one of the best sequels that we've ever gotten from a different director many years later, and I think that it'll continue to speak for a volume of time.
I thought you might be able to help me with the case. Any idea where I could find him?
You police plan on taking me in?
I would much prefer that to the alternative.
Every leap of civilization was built off the back of slaves. Replicants are the future, but I can only make so many. I had the lock, and he has the key.
I think I found him.
That's not possible. If this gets out, we've bought ourselves a war.
Yeah, this is kind of like the definition of like a blockbuster with personality put out by a big studio, right? Like that's dope. I love to see that kind of thing.
This is the type of thing you get when Sony says, let's try to take on Disney somehow.
And they kind of close their eyes and write a check.
Mm-hmm. And they made back more than they spent, so at least there's that.
I like it.
We're on to top 3 docs of the decade. What is your number 3 top doc of the decade, Michael?
I'm going to caveat my own picks first and just say that as I was thinking about this category, I did think about how I just don't watch very many documentaries. I was looking back at my own Letterboxd
That's true,
stats.
you do not.
I, watch over, a couple hundred movies a year, sometimes over 300. I think since I joined Letterboxd in, 2016, I've only seen, a little over 100.
I've seen more than that, and I joined Letterboxd 2 years after you, I think.
Yeah, you should make a best of the year list with 100 docs, maybe. So I have seen a kind of pathetic number to be choosing the best documentaries of the decade. So these are just ones that stood out to me among the ones I've seen. So with that qualifier out there, my number 3 is Rat Film from 2016.
Still haven't gotten to it.
Haven't seen this one yet? Oh, I thought you had. I thought we had talked about it.
Nope. We talked about me watching it. Yeah.
Got it. It's from 2016. It's directed by Theo Anthony. It is about rats in Baltimore, the history of Baltimore's rat problem, in addition to the history of race and segregation and poverty in Baltimore. And it is really fascinating to me how Theo Anthony takes these two different issues and lays them on top of each other and identifies these fascinating parallels between them, sometimes in quite literal ways. It's a very creatively constructed doc where, sometimes you're looking at maps of the city and seeing where the rat problem is at its worst and how that relates to where segregation is clear. You find and follow fascinating characters like people who hunt the rats for fun. He's using things like Google Maps and the Google Maps voice, throughout. It's got a killer score from Dan Deacon, just kind of this off-kilter electronic thing. It's super inventive, really fascinating and meaningful, and just an easy watch. Definitely streaming now. Rat Film. Check it out.
I'm still working on it. My number 3 is a smaller documentary than yours, for sure. Mine is Terrence Malick's The Voyage of Time, Life's Journey.
We go from rats to the cosmos.
In scope, it's a little bit bigger. Geez, how do you explain this? This is a documentary that I believe was envisioned as a project to be made for IMAX specifically. However, it, didn't have a big run. And the voiceover, I believe, was performed by Christian Bale. It follows dinosaurs. It follows the evolution of life. It goes into the cosmos and explores some of the stuff that we see there. It doesn't really make too many assertions or claims so much as allow us to play witness to nature. And the experience that I had viewing it like that was incredibly enriching and one of my favorites of the decade.
Did you see it in IMAX?
I did not.
That I would very much like.
I would have too.
The guy in dinosaurs, he likes them, huh?
I think so.
One I still need to see myself.
What is your number 2?
My number 2 is also from 2016, and that is OJ, Made in America, from Ezra Edelman. It's part of the ESPN 30 for 30 series, which I never thought.
That's a short documentary, right? Anybody can just pick that up and watch it today.
Oh, yeah. It's only, 3 parts, couple hours each part, I think.
I think it's
like
18
that.
hours, right?
Definitely not 18 hours.
Not 18? Okay.
No, definitely not. But it is a 3-part documentary. Each part is, I think, an hour and a half to 2 hours, so it is a long one. And it is about the rise and fall of O.J. Simpson.
Whoa, he fell?
He had a bit of a fall from grace, you might say. And it is a long sit. It's streaming on HBO, and it
7 hours and 47 minutes.
There we go. I definitely did not have time to revisit this one, but still so vividly remember how gripped I was by this documentary and how just astounding it is to me that it looks at fame and wealth and gender and race, and how all those factors played into OJ's rise and fall and the big trial. And it goes into each of those areas in such depth, like in the way so many docs, in the way you wish so many docs would dive deeper into these categories. It just gets there. It just plumbs all of these different variables that were at play, and it's so riveting at the same time that it looks at all those different issues.
They were in a unique position of all that airtime that was exhausted on OJ as well.
Yeah.
To get all that footage, and that's my understanding. They assembled a bunch of that news footage and all that stuff together, because there's more of that from the 90s. I think he was the most covered TV person in the 90s.
Yeah. And I just think it is supremely intelligent in its construction and assembly of material, and charting this really clear arc and the way in which all of those things were at play. And yeah, it's streaming, so highly recommended.
My number 2 is Netflix's Icarus. This is a documentary about the Russian doping program. It takes place concurrently while the doping program is being discovered, essentially. There's our main character, besides the doctor, who I do not recall the name of, is a biker, a pedal biker, who is wanting to learn how to cheat the system and dope to win a race. A bike race, and he's working with the chief doping agent of Russia. And about, I think, a third of the way through the documentary, all of a sudden, everything kind of goes sideways. You start to find out that the man who's been guiding him through the doping program is kind of in trouble, and that the Russian government is leaning on him, and there's a bunch to get into, and I don't want to misspeak because I haven't seen it in a number of years, but it is one of my favorite documentary experiences. It was kind of a toss-up for me between Icarus and This Is Not a Film. I decided to go with Icarus just because I definitely know how true it is, whereas This Is Not a Film has had a lot of noises made about how it might not be an accurate representation. So I went with Icarus. I would encourage everyone to see this. It's on Netflix, and it would only encourage your depth of knowledge regarding the Russian doping agency in the Olympic Games, and as far as things like Lance Armstrong and having a better understanding about doping in competitive sports.
One I still need to catch up with. I think that was Netflix won that award.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the first one, their first Oscar. Is that right?
I don't know. I remember I was excited because I was like, I saw that one.
Yeah. I still need to check it out.
What's your number 1 of the decade, Michael?
My number 1, also from 2016. Just a coincidence, I swear, that all 3 docs came from that year.
The 1 year he watched docs.
This my number 1 doc, which is maybe just one of my favorite docs, period. It might be my favorite doc, period. That is Camera Person, directed by Kirsten Johnston, who is a documentary cinematographer by trade, and this movie is made up of recycled material, essentially, from documentaries she's worked on over the course of her career as a cinematographer. It is in part kind of a memoir, which I think she says as much in an opening statement, where she explains the material you're about to see, and says she thinks of it herself as a kind of memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And it does many different things. On one hand, it is sort of a reckoning with her own role in making moving images. Many of these selected clips show us the ways in which she's kind of setting up a shot, or we hear her, talking from behind the camera or muttering to herself. It's always kind of drawing to our attention that the person this documentary is about, to a very real extent, is Kirsten Johnson, the person making these images, and the role she plays in showing us what we see. And I think about it every time I watch a documentary, really, of any kind. It's also in part about her own relationship with her mother, who's on screen as she's in as she has Alzheimer's, and it's comprised of footage from all over the world, all different countries and cultures, many of which are hard to watch, but I just think it's such a kind of powerful look at what it means to be human, to kind of use that cliche. I just don't know how to get into it more specific than that. But it has stuck with me in very, very meaningful ways.
It's a beautiful documentary.
You saw it recently? So glad you liked it.
I sure did. There's a few scenes kind of stitched together that are of natural beauty, like sunflowers and meadows and stuff. And she'll just put a cue card over that of some fucking terrible mass murder that happened at this location, or some serial raping of some group of people before the pogroms or something. And it's weird because you're disgusted by the writing, but the visual beauty is lovely. And the juxtaposition of that was awesome.
Yeah. I concur. What is your number one documentary?
My number one documentary of the decade is an HBO series as well. It's called The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst. This is one of the magical pieces of cinema from the decade for me. There's only a few pieces of cinema that I can really point to that kind of show the truth of man, and how we are more of a mimetic creature than most people want to admit, meaning that we copy or lie or tell false truths until we're caught. And this is a documentary following a man who's lived his whole life telling falsehoods and lying until he's accidentally caught at the very end of the documentary when he forgot to take his mic off, and he goes into the bathroom and he's got terrible esophageal acid issues because he's lying so much. So he's burping and coughing, and he talks to himself about, I won't say what, but the words that he says to himself cement his doom. And after spending the amount of time you spend with this documentary, I think it's something like 396 minutes, I might be wrong, it's just, there's nothing like it. It's one of the single best experiences I've ever had in the cinema, let alone the decade. Although I didn't see it in the cinema, it is cinematic though, and it's one of the most deliberate interrogations of a subject who deserved to be interrogated that's fulfilling that I've ever seen. I think there's a film called All That Remains, if that sounds familiar, Ryan Gosling film.
Oh yeah, with Kirsten Dunst?
Yes. In which he plays this character, Fred Durst, who is...
Robert Durst, right?
Robert Durst, sorry.
Fred Durst is from
Fred
Limp
Durst
Bizkit.
is a different guy. The director of that one John Travolta movie.
That's not on here, I don't know.
I don't know. Anyways, Robert Durst is a now known serial killer who would dress up as a woman to get away and cross state lines, and he'd faked his own deaths multiple times, hence the the term The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst. I believe it's still on HBO. I would encourage anyone who likes crime drama or anything like that, true crime podcasts, to seek out that documentary, because it is one of the genre-defining documentaries, I think.
I don't remember. Is it a series or like a 3-parter? Must be a series.
It's like a mini-series thing. It didn't have multiple seasons, but yeah, I think that they did the whole shoot and then figured out how they would edit it. And, yeah.
They dig deep.
On to number 6 of the decade. What have you got, Michael?
My number 6 is another Coen Brothers movie. I don't know that we have any directors across our 2 lists who appear twice. It is Inside Llewyn Davis from 2013. This stars Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan, and John Goodman, among others. I don't know that I would even mention him.
Driver.
And Adam Driver, of course.
The star of the decade, sir.
There you go. He's a heck of a singer here.
Don't forget the 2 cats.
That's right. Why do you bring up the cats? Oh, you just mean as part of the cast. Oh, yep. Yes, of course. Ulysses, and I don't think the other one actually has a name.
The other one he thought was Ulysses as
correct.
Well. So
falsely identified as Ulysses. It's set in 60s Greenwich Village, and Oscar Isaac plays a struggling folk singer who has just lost his singing partner and is now trying to make it on his own and is having a very tough time doing so. You spend a great deal of the movie just listening to everyone tell him how much of an asshole he is. But Carey Mulligan in particular, she is particularly good and satisfying in doing so. It has this really kind of cold, wintry look to it with grays and browns, and that all just kind of contributes to this kind of bleak atmosphere about it. I love the cinematography that gives it all that kind of drab light. I love the music for one. There's just a lot of there's just soulfulness to it. It's a weird movie to say you love because it's about a guy kind of winding up exactly where he started. That is kind of the trick ending, in a way, is that he is right back where we saw him in the first scene of the movie. It's, to me, maybe kind of about finding the will to go on, and they pull off that kind of tricky task of making me empathize with the empathize with a guy who does, in fact, turn out to be a bit of a dick. And it's, easily my favorite Oscar Isaac role. I love it.
What'd you say you played?
Folk songs.
Folk songs. Solo act?
No, I had a partner. Threw himself off the George Washington Bridge.
George Washington Bridge? You throw yourself off the Brooklyn Bridge, traditionally. George Washington Bridge. Who does that?
If I had wings like Noah's dove, I'd fly the river.
Explain the cat.
What's its name? I don't know. It's the Gorkline's cat. It slipped out and I don't have the key.
Inside Llewyn Davis.
It's a good movie. It is a good movie.
What is your number 6?
My number 6, and I believe the last entry of this episode, is Richard Linklater's Boyhood, starring Patricia Arquette and Ethan Hawke, and I believe Richard Linklater's son. Is that correct?
I think it's his daughter, Lorelai Linklater.
Oh, it's Lorelai Linklater, and then who's the son?
Eller Coltrane.
And whose child is that, though?
Oh, that I don't know. Like, in real life?
Yeah.
That I don't know.
Okay, I was under the impression it was, like, Linklater's son or something.
Oh, that I am not aware of.
All right, well, hot take. We love this movie, but don't actually know who the boy is.
We spent 18 years with him and still don't know.
This is a film that shows everything. It shows the process of life for Not just a boy, but for our mother character, Patricia Arquette, for the sister, who's played by Lorelai. It also shows us Ethan Hawke coming to terms with being a father and then embracing it to the point where he has another child as his original children who he scarcely parented graduate and go off to college. It's in many ways about the procession of drunken assholes through one boy's life, as he directly says in the film. It's a collection of moments that make up a life, and this film is a collection of those moments. And it's deeply sincere, and it's really hard to explain why this is one of the best films ever, not just of the decade, but it is. It's because of the scope of shooting something linearly over 18 years. It's because of it being so well edited, so careful and thoughtful, and also belligerent and angry and truthful and merciless and...
Don't worry about it.
Looks like you can use the bumpers.
You don't want the bumpers. Life doesn't give you bumpers.
I just love this movie, and it's really weird how many lines it straddles and how I can't really tell you that it has a genre. It feels like it's a documentary more than anything.
I hope you'll be okay talking about it again on part 2.
I will.
But that's it for part 1.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.